The NCAA tournament will play without fans. Mark Emmert says the NCAA is now looking to move the Final Four out of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium into a smaller venue in Atlanta. Regional sites could also be moved to try to find smaller venues since there's going to be no fans in attendance for the NCAA tournament games. Yes, the Final Four. Yes, the Elite Eight. Yes, they will have no fans in the building. It's affecting the NCAA big time. How about the NBA? Keith Smith, Yahoo, NBA, NBC Sports, Pro Basketball Talk. He joins us now on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Keith, I mean, it just seemed like something at first that was like, okay, yeah, they're talking about it. This is real, right? Golden State's playing with no fans tomorrow night, and the anticipation, I would guess, is they're not going to be the only ones, right?
Yeah, that's the way it's starting to feel. We're waiting, as far as I understand, the conference call between the NBA and then the different team governors for each team is still underway. That started at approximately 4:30 this afternoon here on the East Coast. So it sounds like that's still going on. And there are discussions about, do we push the season back, postpone, delay things? Do we just move forward with all the games are played with no fans in attendance? I think the NBA is never overly moved by anything. The NCAA does, but this is a little bit different. Where the NCAA is taking arguably their marquee event across all of their sports and saying, we're just going to play without people in the stands, or very few people in the stands, where we're going to move on. So I think we're headed in a direction where it's going to look very, very different what it's going to be like to watch a basketball game here for probably at least a few weeks, if not a month or more.
Right, and I mean, there's some questions of just back and forth we've had today of, okay, why not do what the Chinese Basketball Association did? Just hit the pause button and just kind of let a couple of weeks go by and then pick your season up. That's really hard to do because of logistics and buildings and stadiums and all that kind of stuff, but it seems that the players aren't so thrilled about playing in front of no fans. So I don't know what the right decision to do here is, but do you think that the league itself should just mandate something for all the teams to be uniform?
Yeah, eventually it's going to come down. Or I think what you're going to see is enough cities and locations where arenas are located are going to do something like what the city of San Francisco did today, and is going to say, hey, you can't have games. I know that seems to be heading in that direction in Washington, D.C., where the mayor of D.C. is kind of, hey, we told you not to do this. You're basically saying we're moving forward anyway. I have the right to tell you not to do it if that's what it comes down to. We'll see if that ultimately is where it lands. But I think that's the direction we're heading in, is maybe it's taken a little bit out of the NBA's hands. But the NBA absolutely wants to make things a uniform decision across the board. They don't want each team being subject to deciding things on their own.
At what point do you expect that to happen? When are we going to get, the memo from Adam Silver? And if you had to guess a little bit, how do you think he is going to handle this moving forward?
My guess is we're going to hear something. It could come down as soon as today when they're off this conference call and all things are decided. That wouldn't surprise me. If not, probably within the next day or so. I think that's where everything is kind of heading towards. That's what it seems to be going. So we'll see what that looks like. I think what is likely to be at least the initial path forward is games without fans in attendance. That seems to be the kind of the easiest decision to make. But that could all change if you have one player or coach come down with coronavirus. Then all of a sudden that starts to change things, because now we're now directly impacted. And then that's where you could see things really start to go sideways, and that's where it could be looking like we're going to make a postponement to the season. But as Mike said, the challenge there is a lot of these teams are the second, third, fourth tenant in some cases in their own buildings. There might be concerts scheduled for later this summer and those things. And I know people are saying, well, those will be canceled too. Well, they'll be canceled now. But if there's something going on in July or August, there's no sense that all that'll be canceled and moved just yet. So it's certainly going to be an interesting time to monitor. I think we'll all be glued to the various news feeds to see what comes out over the next couple of days.
Yeah, and it seems that this is such an odd situation. It's such an odd time of the year, having the advantage of having home court, and that's kind of out the window. And I know that can't be really taken under consideration, but this seems like something that the owners are not making the decision of losing the gates and not playing games in front of fans. This is stuff that's being told to them by government officials, correct? Like the Golden State Warriors didn't get out in front of this by saying, hey, we're not going to play in front of fans because we're being proactive here.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Yeah, they were planning to move forward. The prime example right now is the situation in Washington, D.C. The Wizards, Nationals, and Capitals are all saying, we're moving forward until somebody basically tells us we can't. And then it's going to be changed, and they may be told, all right, now we're telling you. And that's where we'll see ultimately where it all lands. But, no one wants to voluntarily give up money in this situation, and that's going to be things that are going to have real impacts to in the basketball world. As far as if this stretches for quite a long time, we're going to see games canceled potentially. Guys just games not played with fans, which is going to change the gates, which changes the basketball revenue, and that could ultimately lower the salary cap. The real, sad part of this story is fans who work in those arenas aren't making, tons and tons of money. And those fans rely on these games to bring in their paychecks. And that's going to be the rough thing, is they're just not going to be, able to bring in any money. And those are the people that my kind of thoughts immediately went to of, geez, these people rely on this for work. How are they going to handle this?
Keith Smith, at Keith Smith, NBA, very odd stuff happening, odd times where, by the way, the NCAA playing games with no fans. They've decided the whole tournament. Do you applaud them for that? Do you kind of look at that and say that's a little irrational? Because the NBA is in a situation where they're just kind of dancing around it. The NCAA came out and said, not happening, no fans, the whole tournament.
No dance.
Yeah, I think it is the right move, especially when the NCAA's member schools now, I think we're up to something like 70 or 80 schools have switched to virtual classes only. And I think once your schools are doing that, you have very little recourse to say, you can't go to class, but hey, thousands of people can still come watch a basketball game. That's where I think you start to run out of trouble here. So I think that's going to be the that's part of why they did it too. Because as much as the NCAA pretends that they care about students and student athletes and amateurism, they're also driven by money too. But there is a point where it's just not the right thing to do, and they made their move. And I think it's for the NBA. Their situation is, all right, well, we can make our move because the vast majority of NBA fans live within driving distance of the city they're going to the games for. For the NCAA tournament, you had people who had rooms and flights and travel booked to go to those tournament games. And now, people are going to start saying, all right, well, forget it. I'm not traveling to, X, Y, and Z or making any kind of arrangements. I'm going to stay right where I am.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up, is the amount of travel that becomes involved with all of these fan bases, 68 of them, traveling all across the country for multiple weeks at a time. Now, a lot of people might drive, but you do get a bunch of people who might say, hey, I'm going to spend the weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in Tampa, in Cleveland, in wherever these places are. So, yeah, that's a little different than what the NBA is going through here. And then, of course, the whole when you look at the big picture in terms of how this season, I mean, you're coming down the stretch of games here, and you got teams that are jockeying and fighting, and then the teams don't really have any idea whether their buildings, whether they're going to have people in there playing and how they can proceed forward here. It just seems that this whole season seems almost secondary to everything that's going on, and it goes back to, you wonder if just pausing the season or maybe even, I don't know, dare I say cancel it, is almost a better option.
Yeah, I think cancellation is probably the
off the table.
Very last step.
Right.
And probably is off the table for the moment, but that doesn't mean that shouldn't be under consideration. I think you do need to, really kind of keep everything on the table here. And what's unfortunately lost is and I'm as guilty of this as anybody, putting far too much importance on sports in its grand, scheme of things. And it's obviously very important to me. It's how I make my living. But the reality is there are, thousands of people worldwide passing away from the coronavirus. And that's not something anyone should take lightly. And I know people say, well, most people that are passing away are 70 plus and they're not the ones that are at these games. But that doesn't mean I don't get it from you and then I pass it on to, my folks at home who are, older and those kind of things. And that's what is troublesome is I think people forget is whenever you go into one of these places, you're in there with thousands upon thousands of other people. And you have no idea where they just came from, who they've been around or anything like that, nor do you know where everybody is headed next. And that's something that becomes, you have to really focus on that going forward is do the right thing here. And this is it's been, for me, since I've been, following the league as a fan, and certainly since I've been covering it from the start of the season with all the troubles in China to now, this is easily the most turbulent NBA season I can remember.
Well, talk about the effect, too, of what is going on with the Chinese basketball league. They basically did put hit the pause button, but that doesn't mean it didn't affect players from here. That the season was supposed to be done by now. They're going to be prepared to restart this thing in April, but this thing has really thrown off their season, and people were big time affected by it.
Yeah, absolutely. And China today, not the country, but the Chinese Basketball Association and several of their teams have come out and basically said, all right, everybody planning to come back now because we want to restart play on April 1st. Now, this is the first update we've had really to that extent since they paused operations in late January. Now, what the challenge there are a whole bunch of players and their agents who are saying, not happening. We're not going back because there's been no indication given that it's still safe for them to go back to China. The United States government still is warning against travel to China and those kind of things. So I talked to several agents and a handful of players today who are contracted to teams in China who said they can ban me, they can do whatever they need to do. I'm not going back until everything is cleared up and I can feel 100% safe. It's just not going to happen.
Keith, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here with this because I know you don't know this number off the top of your head, but what do you think the financial impact? Let's say the NBA comes out today or tomorrow or even Friday and says, the entire league for the next 2 weeks, no fans. How does that impact the league financially moving forward down the road?
Yeah, it's going to be huge. It's hundreds of millions of dollars is where it's going to come out to. I talked to a handful of different teams today, probably close to 15 to 20, that told me they're paid. Well, what they, revenue from games is somewhere between $500,000 to $3.5 million from a single game. And that's dependent on location. That's dependent on who they're playing that night, what time the game is a weekend, a weekday, all those things factor in. So there are, all of these challenges, and so just even on the low end of that, every two games, $1 million. And that's the extreme low end. And that's what you're looking at here. And ultimately, that'll have, impacts not only to right now, but it'll have impacts down the line where you're going to start to see, all right, well, maybe the salary cap lowers. We've already seen it lower by about $1 million as a projection due to what happened in China. And that's $1 million per team. Now you're talking about, split that even further up. You could see it come down maybe another $1 million or so, depending on how long all these arenas are kind of closed off for. And that's assuming that the games are still played. Now, if you talk about canceling them entirely, now you might have an issue where I don't know all the ins and outs of the TV contracts and all that, but you might have an issue there where you're in default of not providing a product and all those things. So this could, really become messy moving forward.
All right, let's get to some quick news then, because this is obviously this just came out, by the way, not just came out, but a little while ago from The Athletic that the NBA is considering pushing its entire calendar back with this whole thing. But this was something that was interesting, brought up by the Atlanta Hawks owner about 2 weeks ago, which was doing that to start the season, push the whole league back, totally separate from the coronavirus, basically saying, why are we competing with the NFL in October and November and December? Why don't we just start our season in December and play through the summertime so we're only competing with baseball? And I wonder if this could be almost like a trial period to say, you know what, let's push it back a little bit and see what happens when we play in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, you could see that ultimately being what it lands to. I think what's really interesting is you are likely in that proposal. One of the things that I found very interesting is it's almost an admittance by an NBA owner that one of the most exciting times in the league is the offseason. So they don't mind their free agency, big trade period, all that going against NFL games. It's just we don't want our games going against NFL games. So they're basically saying start it up, sometime around the holidays and then move everything back. And there's some things there. Now, the traditionalist in me says basketball was invented as a winter sport. It was invented as, something to be played in the winter. We're going to move most of it to the summer. I've had a lot of people say, well, what would this mean of things like FIBA and the Olympics? I can tell you right now, the NBA does not care about those international tournaments. That's not something they're going to let impact them at all. They know that they're bigger than either one of those international tournaments, so there's no concern on that end. So there's definitely some interest there, and yeah, you're right. This could be let's push this thing back and see what it looks like before playing the vast majority of our playoffs in the summertime, and we're not going up against anything.
Some breaking news with the Sixers: Joel Embiid will play tonight against the Pistons. So he's been out since February 26th. He practiced. He'll be back. Ben Simmons, we know, will not be back and will be reevaluated in about 3 weeks. So getting Joel back, pretty big news for this team. They will play with fans in the building tonight against Detroit. But this is a team, no Ben Simmons for the final at least 3 weeks of the season. Keith here. No Ben for at least 11 more games. Do you see the Sixers being able to make any sort of playoff run with Ben Simmons being out this long? And even if he's able to, he's being reevaluated in 3 weeks, which means if he got back April 1st, he would play about 7 games before the playoffs. Does this kind of just seem like, hey, it's just not Philly's year?
Yeah, I think all things combined together, it just has not gone at all the way they planned. Whether you start out with Al Horford, coming in, the big acquisition there hasn't gone as well. They'd hoped for. Simmons is out, Embiid is missed time. I think Embiid missing time is almost something you price in and plan for at this point. And he's been relatively healthy this season, or at least as healthy as he generally is. But I think Simmons being out, the challenge with back injuries it's something where he could wake up tomorrow feeling real good, and 5 minutes into a game, tweak it, now you're back out for another 2 weeks. It's probably, I was listening to a bunch of players talk about it on NBA radio today. One of the things that they were saying is it's the worst injury you can have. Everything else, you know how to fix it. A back, we still that's just an injury where it can kind of come and go, and that I think is the worry. So we're still another 3 weeks away, and that's 3 weeks from being evaluated. That's not necessarily even 3 weeks from playing, and right. That's only 2 weeks from the start of the playoffs, or a little less than 2. It's only a little more than 2 weeks from the start of the playoffs. So that's going to be a challenge. They're definitely facing an uphill road. They're, still in the mix right there with Indiana. Miami's starting to pull away a little bit, looking like they maybe will hang on to that 4 seed. So it's going to be a tough road for Philly the rest of the way.
And by the way, Brett Brown also announced today, I thought this was interesting, that Al Horford will remain in the starting lineup even when Embiid returns to the floor. So he said when Simmons comes back, we'll reevaluate. But he is going to use Horford and Embiid together. Are you surprised by that, Keith?
I'm not while Simmons is out, because I think what you've done there is you can still achieve the spacing and balance you want to have, because now you're only talking 2 guys who have to play off each other versus 3. So I think you're okay when any one of those 3 is out of the lineup. you're all right to do it. But yeah, it's interesting that when Simmons gets back, we'll see where it goes. Now, if tonight and the next couple games go poorly, with Horford and Embiid starting, I wouldn't be surprised if they pull the plug on that once again and move back. But I think right now you almost have to go that route because I think you're almost kind of using Horford more as a playmaker with Embiid back than anything else.
He's Keith Smith, and you can follow him on Twitter at Keith Smith NBA. Check out his stuff at Pro Basketball Talk, part of NBC Sports, Yahoo NBA, Real GM, and others. Follow him at Keith Smith NBA as news continues to happen almost by the minute here. And he was kind enough to join us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks, Keith.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Stay safe. Wash your hands.
Yeah, man. Oh, by the way, you're in Orlando, correct?
I am, yep.
Is it all right down? I'm supposed to fly to Tampa on Tuesday. Would you recommend this?
I mean, everything seems to be. I'm going to knock on wood real quick here in the office, but everything seems to be okay. But this is word here is theme park capital of the world. We've got a million visitors flowing through this place from all over the world.
Any thought that Disney World? Are they talking about closing Disney down at all?
Not here yet, but they have closed their international parks in China and Tokyo. The two China parks are closed. The Tokyo park is closed. So we'll see what that looks like. But so far, it's business as usual here in the States as well as the park in Paris.
All right, Keith Smith. Thanks, pal.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.